You ever think about alternate versions of yourself? Somewhere out there, in some timeline, some parallel universe, I am still femme. You know, good for her, honestly. I actually really liked my name before I needed to change it. She would also still have that $11,000 that went to top surgery. Femininity is a thing that I enjoy aesthetically, but when it's on me, it feels so horrible. So sometimes I wonder how my style would have developed if my gender had not undergone drastic changes starting in like late high school. The way I've decided to structure this is to make one design for every season and base those designs off of like aesthetics and things that I associate with those seasons, because that's kind of what determines the style of dress that I'm like interested in wearing at a given time, is like what vibe does the weather remind me of. Springtime I tend to associate with a lot of like cutesy and like more modern aesthetics. Usually around January I start getting really back into like solar punk and Ghibli aesthetics, and I'll start listening to a lot of like lo-fi and In Love with a Ghost and maybe some city pop stuff. And then later in the season I get more like whimsical cottagecore, Morike, kind of like Howl's Moving Castle kind of vibes. We're also going to ignore how the Windows 10 screen record function somehow manages to make the footage look super overexposed, even though it's a screen recording, so exposure like isn't a thing in this context. I don't know why it's like that, but I did not want to hunt for a better screen record software, so this is how we're gonna live right now. My initial design for this season was a little more modern and leaned a little more into like casual solar punk meets My Neighbor Totoro, but I decided to change it because it felt just like a little bit too similar to something I might plausibly wear in real life. I wanted these designs to be mostly an exploration of styles that are very far from my current comfort zone. This is gonna be a pretty skirt-heavy set of designs for exactly that reason, because I don't wear them anymore, but I know that she would. I was an Alice in Wonderland kid, and the energy of like running around in like a vibrant wooded area in a fluffy dress, kind of like pretending to be Alice, it's such a specific feeling. And it's something that I know I'd want to translate into my outfits if I could still wear dresses without getting super dysphoric about it. She's also got a fuck-ass bob in all these, because the haircut was a canon event. There is no timeline in which that didn't happen. Anyway, so this look is actually taken mostly from an outfit that I put together once, but I never actually wore anywhere, and I really liked the like kind of casual cottagecore vibes that it had. The big green shirt is a real piece of clothing that I own, that I wear very often, and the dress here is similar to one that I used to have that I only recently finally donated. I also definitely think I would be wearing ribbons in my hair every once in a while. I used to braid my hair with a ribbon through it sometimes, so a femme version of me would absolutely still be doing stuff like that. Alright, listen. Where I live, summer is an absolute dog shit worthless season. It's too hot, and it's hot for too long, and there's only so much you can do with an outfit when your top priority is trying to survive all of the sweat that you're gonna produce. I also didn't have a car up until just a year ago. Can you imagine walking for a fucking hour to the Safeway and back, plus carrying your 2 bags of groceries up a giant ass hill in 90-degree weather every week? Because that's what I had to do. Anyway, the only good thing that summer regularly contains for me is the Renaissance Fair, so I wanted to design a costume for my alternate self rather than casual clothes. I also did realize in hindsight that I could have done like a little medieval revival moment here instead, because I do think that's something that I would get super into, but also I wanted to design the Ren Fair costume, so, you know. For some reason, I struggled a lot with this design. I was initially going for sort of a gender-bent version of my current Ren Fair costume, since I really like leaning into the fantasy vibes and dressing like a little fairy. But I wasn't really liking how it looked, so I started going at it from just a bunch of different angles. I knew I'd be really into the hiked skirt look, but I also kinda didn't want to just like default to the very common bodice and long skirt outfit that every single woman at a Renaissance fair has worn at least once, especially since that's what I used to wear, and I know that I would have designed myself a new costume at some point, but I could not for the life of me figure out what I actually wanted it to look like. It got to the point where I had to physically bust out my old Ren Fair clothes and play around with them to figure out what silhouette I was looking for. And so with the help of an image that I came across when I was looking for fairy core inspiration, I did finally find something that I liked that also felt more original. It still involves the Renaissance Fair bodice because that is another real item that I have, and I spent $169 on it, so I would be wearing that thing for as long as it lasts. I still have no intention of getting rid of it. This is again me taking advantage of the fantasy vibes at the Ren Fair and dressing up like a little fairy, and I took it in a very like cutesy direction here. The vines on my arms and my legs I see as being like a nude fishnet with some kind of fake plant situation attached to it. I think maybe needle felted. I could see needle felted vines working really well for this. I also think realistically I'd have a lot more like ribbons and layers and textures than I put here, and with like some like leaves and maybe some flowers on the vines. But did I want to draw all of that texture? No, so this is what we have. This one is kind of a lot simpler than I would expect for myself when designing an outfit around the fall. It's my favorite season, but I think because this season has so many different aesthetic vibes, and I love basically all of them, it would have been really easy to fall into decision paralysis like I did with the summer design if I had tried to make this a more complicated look. The beginning of harvest season is pretty reliably when I get back on my circus bullshit, so I decided to just fully lean into that. This outfit is kind of a cross point between like a little dressed up for training, a little casual for performance. There's also no shoes in it, because if you're in a training studio, you're probably not gonna be wearing shoes, and also I personally think that thigh-high socks look better without them, and it's my video and I can do what I want. This style for me does derive from performance costumes, which, depending on the discipline, are often gonna be skin tight for functionality, so I find a lot of elements in this style of dress to be very androgynous. Like if I'm wearing leggings and knee-high socks, I'm doing it in a way that makes me think of male ballet costumes. Or if I'm wearing a turtleneck crop top, like that's just because I'm gay. Like that's a fully genderless article of clothing. So in order to angle this design away from something that I could see myself wearing in this timeline, I had to steer the shapes more into placing emphasis on areas of the body that would like make me really dysphoric. Like, the shirt is kind of the main feature here. I really like solid fabric with mesh cutouts, and this particular shape language places a lot of visual emphasis on, like, the having of boobs, which is aesthetically pleasing to me, but also, like, boobs are something that I paid a lot of money to not have. The booty shorts are another thing that I would, like, never wear anymore, other than in the context of, like, dressing up for a specifically slutty vibe. Like, I would never do this casually. Oh yeah, this is also the point at which I realized that I would still be dyeing my hair every now and again, so I just added that into the color palette. And I think the messy space buns would definitely be like a strong hairstyle staple for me. And you know, I didn't draw any inspiration from Arcane for this look, but just know that I would probably be channeling the vibe of like alternate timeline powder with my hair like that. Like just understand that. Hold space for that, if you will. This would not be me without a nod to my historical fashion hyperfixation. It's the thing that got me into this corner of YouTube. It's the thing that taught me a wealth of knowledge about how to sew and how I like to style myself. And it's the thing that really opened my eyes to the whole concept of how clothing is deeply and intimately connected to identity. It was also kind of a natural progression of my steampunk phase, so in the spirit of steampunk, this look is really going to just be like historically adjacent rather than actually historical. I associate this vibe with wintertime because ever since I was like, I don't know, 8 maybe, we would go to the Dickens Fair every year, so my sense memory of Christmas time got pretty solidly merged with the aesthetics of our fictional Dickensian London. And even though I don't celebrate Christmas specifically anymore, I still often feel that vibe of like returning to what is old in the winter. I think it's a seasonally appropriate sort of energy. Now, granted, my specific area of special interest is closer to like the 1840s and 50s or so, and this is like not that at all. It's very Edwardian accordion. But I think the biggest point here is that I absolutely would have made myself a long-ass walking skirt using historical techniques. I do think at some point I might have tried growing the hair back out a little bit so that I could try historical updos. That's something that I never quite got to learn about before I cut it, but I think it's knowledge that I would have benefited from if I had had a more developed sense of style at the same time that I had 40 inches of hair to work with. Or maybe alternate timeline me would just keep the bob and like play around with hair pieces and extensions since those were also used historically. Either way, I explored none of that here and just put a hat on her instead. I think the very feminine clothes paired with the like short hair and more masculine cap give the look a scrappy sort of vibe, like a newsy or like a plucky little steampunk fantasy protagonist. And wow, look at that, we've reached the end of the video. I honestly had a lot of fun with this. I love designing outfits and costumes, and it felt nice to be able to stretch those muscles in more like feminine territory, because I don't do that very often. I feel that all of these designs are, in a sense, recognizable as me, which is a strange feeling that I am not sure I fully understand, even though that is kind of literally what I set out to do. Like, they all kind of remind me of like self-insert characters that I might have made in like college or maybe late high school, like before I started shifting more towards the masculine range of the gender spectrum. And I think it serves as kind of a reminder that like the present self is of course directly informed by every version of the past self. So no matter how much an identity has shifted over time, the history of it is still always there. It's always part of you. And it's important for it to be there in order to better understand the full picture. Let me know if you enjoyed this style of video. It's very different from what I usually do in terms of format, but it was also incredibly easy for me to make, which is great for me right now because between now and Fanime, I'm gonna be juggling 3 different projects and building a PC and trying to learn how Linux works. It's gonna be a while before I upload again. Thank you as ever for watching, especially if you stuck with me the whole way through. If you're new around here and you enjoyed the aesthetics, I'll invite you to subscribe. Usually what I'm doing is making clothing, but maybe you'll see more design videos in the future from me. I don't know, we'll see. If you ever want to keep up with me elsewhere on the internet, my links are all in the description. I'm mostly active on Instagram and Blue Sky. Thank you for hanging out over here for a bit. I'll see you again in like June maybe. Bye.